Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Power Podcast with me, Joe, Alex, and Sam, the Sam.
Great
Give us our
nicknames you've given us.
official titles.
Yeah, everyone's got their official titles. So, today we're going to be talking about stockpile powers, or powers of stockpile. Anyway, so obviously we could talk for ages and ages what this really means, but it's just there's only real two defining factors. A, it has to be something that is holding something in kind of almost like a battery life. And B, the powers drain on that over time or over the amount of usage. A stockpile can be of anything, either numbers of something, or it can be a certain percentage of something. But eventually, the amount of power that they have will eventually wane because they've used it all up. Those are the only real two defining features, but we're going to talk about three easy examples. And then we're going to go into sort of the more topics of exactly like the usual discussion. So, without any further ado, I'm just going to say the easy one. No, actually, no, wait. Did you want to do the DC one, Sam?
Yeah, why not? I'll go for the DC one. I'll go for, I think, probably the easiest one, and considering you initially said battery, I shall go for the Green Lantern and his core.
Yes.
Ah.
How does this stockpiling work, Samuel?
Well, as it has been from the beginning with every Green Lantern, they have a conduit, ergo their green ring. And they need to charge it up via their Green Lantern. They put it into and charge it up like it's a mobile phone. Then they unplug it. Now they have a certain battery life for their ring power. Which usually lasts a couple of days, I think.
Or
but then like whenever and then as they use it, it slowly begins to drain and drain and drain, getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Their manifestations becoming more easily broken, essentially, until it just runs out and bam, that's them out of battery.
So quite
and unable to use their power.
A battery-powered power because it actually has a battery to power it.
Yes. You could say it is battery operated.
It is indeed. In fact, although that it is technically two things in one, a stockpile power because it actually keeps a stockpile of energy inside of the ring, is also requiring a wielder. So yes, Sam, you actually brought that right back around to it's a special item or it's a conduit of powers. So that's kind of an interesting starting topic. Alex, do you have one?
Oh yeah, I do. It's not so much like a specific person, but it is a move within a video game series known as Pokemon. You might have heard of it.
No, not at all.
I don't know. No, well, basically, you train monsters, and you make friends with them, and yeah, basically, there is a move literally called Stockpile.
How does this work?
Well, it's exactly like it says on the tin. You can charge it 3 times like a battery. Basically, the Pokemon in question that knows this power charges themselves like a battery full of energy. Energy from where? You can use your imagination. You know, you can have your minds in the gutter that it literally eats food to stockpile up. Or it just charges from the energies of the universe. It doesn't matter. It's Pokemon. Just go with it. But you can do it only 3 times. And every time it increases your special attack. I think let's say it decreases your it increases your special attack and defense. I think and
Okay.
yeah, but it only for 3 times. But this works in tandem with 2 other abilities called Spit Up and Swallow, where you spit up is where you basically use that energy that you've charged up and you spit it at the target, and it gets like an increment of like 25% of the attack, 50%, and then like 70%.
Oh wow.
So it like keeps getting so basically the more you charge up, the more powerful the attack gets. So it's good it's a good move if your Pokemon is a tank. So like it keeps getting hit and hit and hit, but it does nothing until it just gives you time to build up, and then you just like rinse the Pokemon in front of you. And there's also Swallow, which is the same power, but it turns it inwardly, so it heals you. And again, for the same amount, it's like, the more you charge it up, the more that you can take from that pool and heal yourself.
Originally, I was actually quite nervous about this. I mean, I only let you have this one without any questions, Alex, because the power is literally called Stockpile, and by all definitions, it actually is a stockpile ability. You save up energy each turn until eventually you use all of that energy at once for something big. And I was thinking, I don't know if this is going to be all that good, but no, that's actually the two greatest ways. It's either channeled outwards or channeled inwards for a stockpile. So no, I think that's a really good one. In all honesty,
Yeah. Also, that it's quite fun as well, like because the free there's basically free abilities that you can learn at the same time. Usually, when Pokemon learns Stockpile, I mean Stockpile on its own, it just increases your stats, fine. But you know, usually you learn Spit Up and Swallow as well, unless you're a specific type of Pokemon. Like if you're a Snorlax, which are known to be greedy, you never learn Spit Up. So because everything that you take inwards, you're not giving it outwards ever again. And the same for some reason with Quillfish, like it can't learn Swallow for some reason. I guess it's because it's always bursting outwards.
It makes sense,
yeah.
I guess. That's kind of an interesting.
Yeah.
Without going too much into my inner
Yeah.
game nerd, I do love it when games have those little tiny details about that kind of thing. Like, oh, this guy hasn't learned that. Why? Because Snorlaxes can't actually throw up, and they're too greedy, and they always want to continue eating.
Mm-hmm.
They always want to keep their food down, and it's that thing of like, oh well, Quillfish can't really eat that much. It only puffs itself up because it's just a big balloon thing, but really, truly, it's probably its stomach and digestion is not all that much. It can inflate itself, but it can't inflate its mouth or something. And it's just such a cool little detail to add into those games.
I know, right? And also, yeah, one thing that I did want to talk about with the Stockpile ability is that it does have a limit to it. Like with I think we'll talk about it later with Stockpile abilities. Like if you overcharge it, it stops working.
Yeah.
You can. It's only free.
We'll go into
We'll go into that later. Anyway, it's a cool ability.
The one that I wanted to actually bring up is this is my example, because I think it's the biggest and easiest one is usually the Superman one. But since you've already covered a DC character, I think I'm gonna have to go above and beyond for a different one. Here, Sam. I'm gonna go. I'll just reach for this low hanging fruit here. Oh, what does it say on it? My Hero Academia. On this specific fruit, it is showing me 5 different stockpile abilities. One for all for one. Fat absorption. Rewind, and there is another one here. I'm just looking at it. It's called stress. Basically, all 3 of these powers are to do with stockpiling, and just to basically give a quick rundown of almost all of them, all for one is all powers for one man. He can steal powers and stockpile them into himself. One for all, it is a power that literally, when it is passed to the next person, they stockpile power the more they use it and the longer they have it. Not to mention, it is also a collective stockpile of the previous amount of power that was stored up in the previous user. Next one is fat absorption. The more fat the person actually has, the more durable their body is. Blades, bullets, blunt force trauma. This person can absorb almost an infinite amount of damage resistance, just soaking it all up. And even better, if it does seem to be too powerful for the physical user, it can actually burn away the fat and create a massive amount of muscle, absorbing all of the kinetic energy and allowing them to dispel one very powerful melee attack. And finally, I'll just go down to these last 2. The stockpiling ability of stress is the more physical and mental as well as emotional stress the user has. They can actually use it as a hulking power boost by giving them a basically energy field around their body, like a massive powerful mech suit, like a monster. Kind of a bit like a mixture between... It looks a mixture between Venom and Hulk. In the terms of it's hulking massive, but it kind of looks a bit as if it's made out of Venom, from obviously the Marvel universe. And as I said, the final one is Rewind. We don't really know exactly what the stockpile is for it, but all we do know is the horn on this little girl's head. The larger it is, the more energy she stores up, and therefore the more amount that she can rewind biological life by either a couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of years, or even their entire lifespan to the point of which they don't exist anymore. So, those were all of the different ones from My Hero Academia, and those were all different stockpiles. So, let's get into the actual topic at hand and go into a more controversial topics. Sam, explain to me why you think that Spawn. You think Spawn is a stockpile power user?
Because he is.
Could you explain what his powers are, or at least the stockpile parts of his powers?
Okay. In Spawn, he has a counter that is his necroplasm. Starts off at 9,999. If I do remember correctly, he can increase it by either killing demons or through other means. I can't quite remember. It's been a long time since I read Spawn.
Okay, I can remember. So this isn't a video game mechanic or anything. This is actually like a.
This is in the comic.
Oh, okay.
In the comic, this is what they do, and this is what humans have in that comic book series.
I mean, I wouldn't have a problem if it was from a video game mechanic. I just wanted to know.
I think they did do it for one of his games. I think it was for the PS1 one. They did the mechanic as well, but essentially every time he uses his powers. I think it's more, like shooting blast out of his arms, and like flying, a bunch of other powers that he can do. So it's
kind of like soul energy or something.
Yeah,
but he can get it from other beings.
It has been a long time since I've read Spawn. I should say this.
So,
this is me. Yes,
you're telling me that you wanted to bring this character up. But you didn't do research on them.
Yes, but it's only because you... Yes, but I do remember the specific counter.
Okay.
The fact that he only... I remember the counter, and I remember the fact that he uses up energy. And that whenever he uses up all of the energy, he can't use his powers anymore, and he does die at that point. So essentially the kind of mechanic is between keeping the energy and using it sparingly.
I mean, when it comes to abilities like this, because there's also like ki and chakra in other situations, and also kind of like they have chi and certain other things. Whereas like the life and spiritual essence, when it comes to stuff like that, where it's like, oh, if the person loses it all, they die. I always wonder if that's necessarily a stockpiling ability, or if it's actually just their lifeblood, and it just so happens that their ability is to harness their lifeblood.
I was going to ask you the same question about Dragon Ball Z, to be honest. Like, does he count as having stockpile, like charging, up attacks, or is that like just part of like a technique?
That's more like power. I mean, if anything, the attacks are stockpile powers, because it's like, oh, the spirit bomb, that's a stockpile power, because you create an orb of people bringing energy together to make this massive, powerful power orb of spiritual positive energy, and then it is then thrown as a massive bomb. That's a stockpile power. But their key, I feel like that's more like a lifeblood ability. Their key is like a finite amount of power that if they ran all the way to zero, there's a possible chance that could kill them. I mean, in Naruto they actually do state, if your chakra goes to zero, like, or in other words, if a body is at zero on chakra or has no chakra left, that's actually the equivalent of the very spiritual and mental and physical essence that basically keeps your soul attached to your body is no longer there. Like, the spiritual energy that keeps your soul attached to your body is no longer there, so therefore you just die. Or it's just the equivalent of, it is your life force. If all of your life force is gone, you're dead. But the one thing I never understood about that is, in Naruto, they actually do have the difference between life force and chakra, because someone uses a forbidden healing technique that requires a person to use their own life force. So
Naruto's a bit,
it's
Naruto's
law, though.
Like 500 books, of course they're going to bring in different magic.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, at one point it just goes completely upside down and backwards, and it completely, like, just shoots itself in its own foot on its own.
I mean, I dare say, Joe, probably more than once.
Yes, you're 100% true. I mean, I will just say this to anyone who wants to read it. The one problem that I have with the series, just this is a mild spoiler, is they try and tell you that no matter what you do, you will always accomplish your goals regardless of who you are born as. I want to point this out. Naruto is born with the Nine-Tailed Fox Spirit in him. Sasuke is born from an ancient clan of very powerful beings that have super eyes, and at the end, it pretty much just comes down to those two. And, like, okay, fair enough, they, like, struggled really hard against certain things, but I'm sorry, but one guy gets basically nepotism, and the other guy basically was born powerful. So, I'm sorry, but the show isn't really selling me on the whole point, especially because right at the end they do this huge thing, which I would mute my mic for and put a massive censor on it to say what it is to you so that then other people don't hear it. But I'm just going to put this massive spoiler warning. I'm going to say it. I'd say wait about 10 seconds from now. Okay. What happens is they find out that they're the reincarnations of powerful demigods.
Of course. Logic. Makes sense.
Okay.
Right.
And
be honest.
now. Okay. There we go. So, it's been around about...
Should I give a giant spoiler for Spawn then? Turns out he's actually dead.
Well, I don't think that's actually
Crazy.
a spoiler. Isn't that like the main thing?
That was a joke.
Yeah.
The joke.
That was a joke.
Either way, so getting back to the point is, I don't know if lifeblood abilities count as stockpile powers, because if it keeps them alive, it's the same equivalent of if you were to say a bloodbender or a blood manipulator using their own blood. It's like, yeah, that's technically a stockpile, but it's more like it's the equivalent of there is a finite amount of stuff that you can control and use, rather than they're empowered by a specific thing. It's kind of like the equivalent of a bloodbender, basically giving themselves blood transfusions, like basically like absorbing and draining the blood out of other people. Because at that point, you could then say vampirism from Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate. So. I don't know. What do you think, Alex, to weigh in on this?
I don't know. Yeah, because it is sort of like, yeah, I think you'd think of it like a battery is a good thing. It needs to be like a separate container. If you are the container itself, I don't know. It's a little bit like, well, it's too ingrained into you. It's like saying that, you know, you're kind of like splitting hairs a little bit. I think saying, oh yeah, you know, you could say the body is a battery and stuff, and it's like, well, no, not really. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm making any sense of that. It's I think that they are separate.
I don't think there's anything about the bad about having the body being a stockpile. I just mean that if the stockpile ends, it actually kills them, because at that point, the stockpile is actually just keeping them alive.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like it should be a separate thing, so it's like it doesn't kill you if it runs out or goes over. You know, it needs to be separate. You know, from your life force. I think. You know, then it's like too internalized. I don't know if it can be. I don't know if it can.
Though I have just to make sure that Sam gets a more definitive win or loss on this argument. I have just looked up the definition of stockpile. Noun, a large accumulated stock of goods or materials, especially one held in reserve for use at a time of shortage or other emergency. A stockpile of sandbags was being prepared, etc., etc. Or a verb, accumulate a large stock of goods or materials. He claimed that the weapons were being stockpiled.
I would say being alive is a pretty good.
I'd say that's a good
reason to stockpile.
I don't.
Yeah, all right. You've convinced me.
I have to say.
I was going to say to you, Alex. Would you say then that Vampire the Masquerade, having blood, would be stockpile? Considering whenever you run out of blood, you don't die.
I mean, that is true. I mean, you're already dead, so yeah,
I mean,
it kind of is. It's basically just an energy source, and if you run out of it, you either go all fucky wucky in the head,
I'd
or
say
you go into
okay.
torpor,
Here's
so you're
okay.
kind
So
of dead.
here's the relative similar words: stock, store, supply, accumulation, collection, reserve, hoard, cache, bank, pool, fund, mine, reservoir, arsenal, or amassment. Or it's a store up or amass. I'd say only
store blood.
I'd say only because that it is something that isn't his own lifeblood that he's using. I'd say that ki chakra stuff like that, where it's like natural amounts of energy that they're tapping into. I'd say that doesn't count as a stockpile. However, they can make stockpile abilities, like as I've said, like the spirit bomb or the special head diamond crystal ability that someone can store up a certain amount of chakra in their forehead so that they can have super regeneration. Stuff like that. That is a stockpile because they're amassing a small amount of energy in that specific location. But if it's naturally constantly coming back, that's not necessarily a stockpile, especially if it is to do with their own life force, because it's just their life force basically coming back, their ki, their essence, their willpower, their spirit, whatever, their energy, if it's naturally constantly there. However, spawns does count for the reason that it doesn't always naturally come back. Because you said it's 9,999, and that can go down, and it can only come back when he's killed demons or other spectral beings.
If I remember correctly, I think he steals it from other beings.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
So it's similar.
It has.
No, go.
Just because for the I don't think Connor read Spawn. I know for a fact it wasn't in the cartoon they did of Spawn that much, but in the it has been a long time since I've read that. But I don't think he fought. Yeah. All right, never mind. What are you saying?
Either way, because that although that his lifeblood is directly connected to it, I would say that because as long as it doesn't naturally come back, and it does come back, and it does in other words, he can keep it from other sources. In other words, he can take it and it actually is stored up from other sources. I would consider that as a stockpile because he is actually amassing more and he's storing more up. Similar to if I was to say you're storing bullets up, whereas if I said you're storing food up in your body by eating it, that's not stockpiling. Stockpiling would be putting it aside, putting it together, or kind of almost like a gluttonous thing of having more than you require, whereas that's exactly it for Spawn. It's not only the thing that keeps him alive, because if he goes to zero he dies, but it's actually also the thing that literally gives him more power, more super abilities, or just the ability to shoot lasers and so on and so forth. As he said, it just grants him special abilities. So, yes, Spawn's ability
would you agree
counts as a stockpile. That just so happens to also be directly connected to his life force.
And because I know Xanath will heartily agree with me on this, would you then say... or Coin, as he's probably more known.
Coming soon entertainment, I think you mean. No, go on. I just had to say that. Just
the man of many names.
The man by many names.
Would you then agree that Vampire the Masquerade vampires, considering whenever they use their powers, such as running really fast or being super charismatic or punching someone really hard, they use up their blood. They use up their blood using said powers.
Okay, so
actually, I think it is. Yeah.
Every time that they use okay. So two things first. If they run out of blood, do they die?
No, they either go into a mad rage.
Okay.
A mad rage, or they pretty much just don't die per se, but they die. Then they go into
torpor, I guess. Yeah, where it's basically you're pretty much just immobilized. So you're already. It's what the dead is when you're dead. It's someone has to wake you up.
Not final death, but it's death.
That's more life force then, because they require it to keep alive or they require it to keep awake. And by that same technicality, it's like food. They are amassing energy by eating things and storing it up. Same, for instance, if I was to say blood sugar levels for regular living normal creatures, they have to continuously eat to gain calories so that then they have enough energy to continue on doing their daily tasks or to hunt or to do things. For instance, you could say, oh, you burn a certain amount of calories standing up and walking around, burn a certain amount of calories by punching someone. It's just that theirs is based on a different biological economy. So by that circumstance, I'm going to say no, it's not a stockpile. Because it's more
You're going to be
based...
yelled at by coming soon.
I think if Coin listens to this, he'll understand what I mean by this. However, I am not going to say that there aren't any stockpiling abilities in Vampires the Masquerade's vampires. I'm also not going to say that all vampires don't have that, because stockpile amass can also be an amass of time. For instance, like an amassment of starvation can further increase a specific vampire's powers. By that technicality, in Skyrim, those vampires are actually stockpile empowerment, because their stockpile empowerment is starvation. The longer they haven't eaten for, the more powerful they become. But it doesn't weaken them in the terms of their mortality, nor does it weaken them in the terms of their powers. It might make them a little bit more susceptible to certain things, but that's more of the curse of their powers in the first place. So it just makes them closer to their abilities. So, by that technicality, by the evidence that you have given me, Sam, I would say no. Do you guys have any other ones? Like Alex, do you have any ones that you might think maybe they might know?
You know what's I guess kind of weird, because we talked about Superman and stuff. He's like and the Green Lanterns and that. I don't know whether this counts and stuff, but when I was like conceiving of like talking about this, I thought of Popeye and his spinach empowerment. And like the more he eats, the stronger he gets.
Well, the reason I
by
say
cartoon
yes
logic
is because that in cartoon logic, when he eats it, it does give him super strength or the ability to fight. So I'd say yes. But at the same time, I'd also say maybe not.
Yeah, because I don't think that he has like a capita or a storage thing. It's literally just sort of like
it gives him a time limit of power, doesn't it? Because he can get hungry, or the spinach eventually wears off, and then he has to crack out another tin, or
yeah, it's just like it's not like if he just downs like even more spinach, he'll like get more and more, powerful. I think he does have a limit to his super strength. Depending on what cartoon you watch.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking it's borderline for me.
Depends on what continuity. Yeah, I'd say I was actually going to ask
in
you
the Popeye extended universe.
he
was played by Robin Williams.
I was actually going to ask you two about this one then, because you guys have talked about Popeye, you've talked about Spawn. I was actually going to say a stockpile user that is specifically a little different is I was actually going to bring up Parasite. Because we've already explained that he has the ability to absorb life force or stamina or fatigue or energy or life energy. And over the amount of based on the amount of power, he has a certain amount of time limit of someone's or multiple people's abilities and powers before he then runs out and then has to absorb life again from those specific individuals that gave him those powers if he wants those powers back. So, discuss.
Depends on the continuity.
Well, based on the parameters that I've given you there.
Is it okay? Like, is it like whenever he needs it to survive, he's really hungry and like he dies if he doesn't absorb life force?
Again, based on the Spawn argument, I'd still say even if he does die without it, it's still stockpile.
It'd be more like food in that case.
It is food,
he
but it is food, but
as the vampire argument.
No, but this is also the Popeye argument, though. Like, it is food to him, but yes, but it also gives him the time limits effect rather than each and every individual action that he does zaps away the amount of powers, and it's not like food. I mean, technically, you could argue that as well, but only because that, like, again, the time limit is based on whether or not he gets hungry, didn't you say? So if he gets hungry, I guess it's not really. I guess it's in some laws it is by technically he is amassing power based on like he's amassing a certain amount of time with that power. He's amassing a certain amount of power from someone for a time.
Yeah, it depends. It does depend on the continuity. On some continuities, he needs it to survive.
Yeah.
Some of them, I think, if I remember correctly, there are a few where he just eats like you just have normal food, and it's more like he just does it for the superpowers.
Well, actually, hang on.
And because he gets memories and various other additions.
He can do that. He can amass stuff. He can store power, but ultimately that power is being used constantly and passively the second that he stops draining them, isn't it? Similar to, as I said, like once you've finished feasting, the metabolic rate has begun. Like it's now okay, and you've swallowed the last mouthful, and boosh, you are now digesting it. Your body is now currently metabolizing all of the things that you've just consumed. You have this amount of time of this amount of calories before you've used up this entire meal.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say one thing, though. This is actually probably the thing that's going to really settle the argument for me for the vampires one. When you drink the blood of certain creatures, if you don't use any of the special abilities, does that power from the blood stay there? So in other words, say for instance, like if I was like a super lazy vampire, my guy just drank like 4 humans worth of blood, and then just sat around for like 100 years. Would he need to drink?
No. Actually,
well, that's the thing. Because if he needs to round all the time. By the whole masquerade rules and that. That's the game mechanics. That is. So it's okay. He needs to. Eventually it will dry up. Or if he gets really lucky, he just knows Golconda, then he doesn't have to.
No, I mean say for instance, he just went out on one night. On a Tuesday night, for some reason, drinks 4 humans, completely dry, and then just comes back to his digs and is like, I'm just going to stay here, never bother using my powers, never bother using my superhuman abilities. How long could he go without needing to drink without going torpor?
But you go to sleep every night in vampire mode where you enter torpor technically, but you die for the evening, and you then, if you're lucky, you wake up and you don't need to use your blood. You do what's called a rouse check. And if you fail a rouse check, you use your blood to wake up. If you succeed, you wake up and you're not hungry.
Then I'd say
by technicality.
No, I'd say it's not stockpile. Because it's not something that you can just optionally store and then just be like, no, I'm not going to use this to power my power. It's no longer a stockpile power. At that point, that's a stockpile lifespan or a stockpile. In other words, it's the same thing with us. It's like, you wake up. Do you feel hungry this morning? You wake up. Are you starving? Are you thirsty? Do you need to go to the bathroom? It's a random chance as to whether or not you'll have the squits the day after, I don't know, a really feisty, hot and spicy meal or something. So no, I'd say no. It's not stockpile ability. It has stockpile qualities, but I'm afraid it's more like a metabolic ability, which is kind of what brings me into the argument for the Hulk. I'd say it's more.
Parasite runs out, and if he doesn't intend to use it, just runs out over time. Even if he doesn't choose it.
In that case, then for him it is. It is actually a metabolic one rather than a stockpile, because even though that he does gain power, it's more of a side effect of him eating. It's like for instance, the Vampires and the Masquerade. Certain races get certain different abilities and racial features based on their race, It's the same as Parasite. If he absorbs life essence, another being could also absorb life essence and not get their powers. They just are just healthier or regenerate or something. So,
Like, if he does just a normal human, he doesn't get anything.
but
But if he absorbs something like
what I mean
Superman,
is that there's actually another character that I could actually bring this up. I think it's like I think he's called like Deadbolt or something like that, or Lightning Leech or something. Basically, he's got similar abilities to Deadwire and Electro, where he can absorb lightning and electricity. And at one point, you find out that you can actually absorb the electrical pulses inside of the brain by basically absorbing them and just killing people.
Do you just mean the guy from Infamous?
I mean, you could also use that as well. I mean, he's actually a DC villain, but yes, the guy from Infamous, I guess he can also do that. And that's a stockpile power. That is by all means a stockpile power. But what I'm actually talking about is this guy, this Deadwire guy, or Deadbolt, I can't ever remember what his actual ability is, or his name is, but he actually absorbs lightning and absorbs electricity and he gains more power. But no matter who he takes it from, even if it's another electric power guy, even if it's from the Flash where he can absorb the Speed Force, he doesn't get speedster powers. He just is absorbing him like as if they are a living battery to him. So, by that technicality, his power is stockpiling more and more electricity, or it's just lightning absorption. Whereas, like Parasite, he is absorbing this to keep himself alive, and he just so happens to have after effects. There are also other characters in the DC and in the Marvel universes that absorb life essence and life force from people, and they don't get the powers from other people. It just so happens to be that Parasite is either the only specific lucky guy with that meta power, or it's just because his race is different, and that's how the race is able to do that. So that's why I say it's their metabolism and metabolic capabilities rather than a stockpile. And if nobody likes my answer, I'm sorry.
Well, fine.
I've been studying a
You're
lot
tearing
of these.
this podcast apart!
I'm sorry. I've been studying a lot of these kind of powers, and they really do fascinate me. I mean, I'm gonna bring.
I know you come in every week, even though like saying, "Oh, like I haven't really done much research," and it's like you just like put like just a whole wedge of notes on the table, like funk, and like oh.
And then there's just me
And they're like,
on
well,
subjects that there's some subjects where I'm well learned.
Oh no, I think you're
There's
pretty. I think
subjects.
I'm
I mean,
probably
Sam-
on the podcast. I'm the least learned of the two of you
Sam,
because
you
it's
have
like
surprised me.
Whenever you brought up your diamond people from
he means
Nick's
Steven
Bizarre
Universe.
Adventures or whatever it's called.
Yes, yeah.
Your diamond people. You rock folks.
I mean they're diamonds and gems and crap.
Okay, another one,
Different.
just in case if people are wondering. Speed Force is not a stockpile power because you do not use that power up and you do not amass it in the same way.
Well,
yes, you can steal it from people. Yes, it can be stolen from you. So by that form, yes, it can be considered as a stockpile. I've immediately already turned my own mind to this.
You've talked yourself out of the argument now.
well,
Yeah.
I was even
Speed Force
going to
is a
use that. I was
stockpile
going to mention the time where he went to the Marvel universe. There was no Speed Force there. So the only way to access the Speed Force was to stockpile it inside a machine beside him. To use it up. So, bam! Argument ended.
I mean, I was also going to say the Rebirth comic where he fights Godspeed, and it actually turns out that there is an actual thing where the more speedsters there are with the Speed Force, the less powerful certain speedsters are. So all of the forces have a certain amount of power, even though that they are supposed to be infinite dimensions of energy, but never mind.
Forget Flashpoint. They mentioned that in that movie as well.
Yeah, although, yes, I will say that, yeah, I mean, damn it, I really like it.
I think he said the comic's different, but in the movie
The comic's
it was
a little
the fact
different,
that
but the
two
movie...
speedsters.
Yes, it is the fact that there's two speedsters, but the only reason is because one speedster, at the exact moment that he's trying to time travel, he's also using the same amount of power somehow. So in other words, like, whilst he's about to try and run back in time, the other guy is also trying to run at the exact same pace, that running in either in the opposite way, or basically to just try and basically sap up enough of the speed force that he can't break through the time barrier. I like how you and I both did that, just as disappointed, just time barrier.
I liked it. I liked the time boom scenario that you mentioned.
You run through the sonic
barrier
barrier and you create a sonic boom. You broke the time barrier, Flash. Time boom. Ripples throughout all of reality, changing the ways and the courses of history.
Like that. That makes sense to me.
It's dumb to re-explain it without quoting it, but yes, I do like that.
I mean, no, it makes sense that specifically the way his powers work, as opposed to other time travel powers. Makes sense that considering what he's literally doing, just running really, really fast.
What, you mean like the Forever Force, which is now just an actual force that allows the user to try and travel through all of time?
I wasn't saying that.
No, I know, but it's still dumb, and I just needed to vent about it. Although it is...
It's more like the...
It's a cool concept, I just don't really like the fact that... to be
anyway,
fair,
enough about the speedsters.
Anyway, yes, the fact that yes, stockpile powers, yeah, just like Superman is a stockpile user because he stockpiles a certain amount of solar radiation, and it can eventually run out. And also, if it's removed from him, he can have a normal human life, because that at one point when he unleashes all of his solar radiation through the Nova Bomb that he does, the Fortress of Solitude scans him and it actually believes him to be a human. For 24 hours, he doesn't have his powers and he's actually completely just human. Or at least relative to that concept. Even though it doesn't make sense because it's supposed to be a biometric scanner and it should be able to actually tell that his DNA is Kryptonian. Damn it, logic! But yeah.
That was a dumb scene.
Either way, so yes, that's...
it could be that Superman's just really bad at electronics, that the only way he can measure things...
he is a journalist. He is a journalist,
yes,
really.
But he builds robots. I'm sorry, he builds...
Yeah, they're not very good robots. He gets them in a kit and assembles them. He's not...
Okay, fine. Right, well.
Wait, are you saying he's like Mr. Fantastic? The world's smartest dumb guy?
The world's dumbest smart guy or the world's smartest dumb guy? We have no idea.
With their powers combined, they make the dipshit squad.
So
the dummies.
The dummies. I want that to actually just mean something. It's it needs to be an acronym, and then just at the end it's men super. Just at the end, just dummies. But it's dumb and just S at the end. It's just dumbs, but everyone pronounces it.
The dumbs.
The dumbs.
Yeah, it's the fact that they come up with it and then they don't realise what it says because they are the dumbs. And, they say, oh man, people are going to laugh at us now. Oh, well, it's up there. There's no way of changing it. Can't figure it out.
The funny thing is that they go, oh man, people are going to laugh at us now. And they say that 4 years into it. So that's one. I'd say Hulk is, but only under the unique circumstance of adrenal and emotional empowerment stockpiling. But here's the twist. I don't think it's the same way as any of the others. I think, like most of these stockpile abilities, it's based on a certain amount of power and it's being burnt out. For instance, imagine... someone says, as I said, someone's got a stockpile of bullets, or a stockpile of energy, or a stockpile of firewood, but the second you get it, it lights itself on fire. And it's oh, I've got a log, and it instantly lights itself on fire. Oh, we need a stockpile of logs. And someone just throws tons and tons of logs onto it, and all of the logs just keep burning and burning and burning. So you just have to infinitely keep throwing more logs onto it, so you can have this massive raging fire, because it started the second that you put the first log down, so you might as well keep throwing it. And it's the same thing with the bullets thing. As soon as you get one bullet, it's instantly fired out of the gun, so you have to just keep feeding it all of the massive amounts of rounds. So I'd say... for Superman and Hulk, they are different because although Superman can passively keep his powers stored in his body without always using them, Hulk cannot. The second that he amasses any amount of adrenaline or rage, he suddenly bursts into this massively powerful creature. And as we know, the angrier it gets, the more powerful it gets. But the second that he loses too much of that anger, rage, or adrenaline, he then becomes back to Bruce Banner, depowered.
Well, depends on continuity and what comic you're at. What comic you're at.
It's most of the things. Oh, sorry, Sam. Do we want to go into different continuities? Because I could also say the fact that the gamma thing is also a stockpile ability. Sorry, what I really meant to say was the gamma radiation, aka the hell dimension radiation that he has in his body, because he's actually powered by the one below all, because he's actually powered by basically a demon god for some reason.
My brain is just depleting the more you talk about this. It's just
You've lost all your stockpile of caring.
I have. I've lost all my stockpile. Yeah, the stockpile of bucks that I had is now run out.
I mean, that is actually a power. That's actually a stockpile of power.
Well, are you actually serious? That's a power that Deadpool would have? I think.
No,
that's.
You know what? If this actually brings me into the next part of this podcast that we usually do, what stockpile powers would you have? I really want to get jingles at some point, like dun 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 dun, da da. I don't know, something cool. But it's like episode like.
I want it to be exactly that. You go dun 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 dun. Yeah. The most bored fashion imaginable.
You know what? We'll call this segment "What Do We Want?" So, like, for instance, like if you could have a stockpile power, what would you want, or what would we want? And we have to make it up our own. Like, we have to completely make it up. And so the jingle will be, "What do we want? What do we want?" Oh no, what do we want?
About 30 episodes, we finally get a jingle.
And it's just me just
I think that's just 4 years in, and I'm like, oh man, no one's going to take us seriously anymore.
Oh, we are the dumbs. We are the booby, the fools.
I will figure out a way to make some kind of jingle at some point, but it will be like our anniversary 100th episode, and just be finally like, hey guys, we finally got that jingle for the What Do We Want segment. Okay, play it. And it's just like one note. Boop.
It's like a triangle just going ding. And on with the segment.
You know what? I will buy a triangle. If our listeners want to have just me playing a triangle once and saying, what do we want for the What Do We Want segment, I will do it. I will buy a triangle.
Do it. Look, I'm calling back. Look, this is me directly talking to our listeners right now. Make him do it.
Connor.
Make him do it.
Make him do it, Connor.
Peer pressure.
Juice,
peer
Connor,
pressure.
Des. I know a few of our listeners. Names.
That one guy from Lithuania.
We hear you. We don't understand.
You specifically.
We don't understand
we don't know why.
But we
don't know why you're
want
here.
it. We want you to know that we hear you, or at least you hear us, and we know that you hear us. Anyway, what do you want?
Why?
What do we want?
What do you want?
Yeah, that's a good. I'm always put on the spot with these ones. With stockpile ability.
Actually, before we go into the what do we want one, I will say one last one. It's one from an anime. Cannot remember what it is, but it's money stockpiling, where this guy can actually he's more powerful the more money he spends. So he has like a massive bank account, and he can store like he goes, all right, I sacrifice $100, stores it up into a massively powerful punch, and just instantly just like breaks apart brick with his fist. So yeah, sorry. Anyway, I just thought that was cool. Like
that is cool. I mean, well, that's kind of real life, though, isn't it? You know, I mean, you can do that with money.
I could bring up the great Welcome to Demon School Rumikun.
Oh yes, of course. With the
second season.
Yeah. Anyway,
he has a magical ring because he said to the demon world he can't do magic, whereas all the demons can. And as he is a human, he gains the power of magic through a magical ring that absorbs magic from other people.
There you go.
So it's kind of actually set by like a Green Lantern ring, except magic.
Although I always feel
so it's like the Alan Scott Green Lantern ring.
Yes, you figured a way to wiggle it in there. Your own personal anime reference, and also Alan Scott. He was talking about Alan Scott before we came on here, listeners, and I didn't know how he was going to get it in after he failed to do it when he first said Green Lantern. But well done.
Screw
sir.
you,
Well
Hal
done.
Jordan.
Well done. Yeah. Nobody calls hashtag Kyle Rayner.
Hashtag not my Green Lantern.
Hashtag my Green Lantern was actually Jon Stewart until then I found out about John Rayner. I was like, okay, John Rayner's pretty cool. But yeah, my Green Lantern is
Kyle
Jon
Rayner.
Stewart. I grew up knowing that Jon Stewart was Green Lantern, and then I found out, oh, it's this really boring white guy pilot, and I was like, cool. What's his deal? He's the williest. Cool. No, that's probably
Hey,
the
do
worst
you know
way
what?
of saying it.
He made a very good. It's not the Phantom Stranger. What's the other guy called?
Spectre.
Spectre. He made a really good Spectre.
He's
Anyway.
better as a villain.
What
But
do we
anyway, enough
want?
of that. I've got one. I've got what I want. I got what I would want. I think that what I would want, which would be funny, like going off from your like money empowerment thing. What about trivia empowerment? Like you could be like the amazing nerd that also gets empowered every time you like absorb information. Especially on like pulp countries, like when you watch loads of films and animes and stuff, you become more physically and mentally powerful. You could become the alpha nerd.
So in other words, the more
think about it.
information your character knows / remembers, the more powerful they are.
Yeah, like in other ways, other than like just
Just
being a trivia king. Like just every time like you absorb enough for like a quiz, you're on University Challenge, you get absolutely jacked at the same time.
Now, just to remind the listeners, a stockpile power doesn't necessarily have to be a finite thing, nor does it actually have to eventually run out. It just has to be something that you've amassed over time. Just because that I said at the beginning it's like a battery doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way of doing it. For instance, as Alex said, stockpiling. As I then said, the one of one for all, it's not a battery. The more time that they spend with the quirk, the more times that they pass it on, more people it goes through, more powerful it becomes. It doesn't have a limit as to how many times you can use it, nor does it run out like a battery. So that's not the only reason as to why stockpile powers work. I'm just saying that was a good example for it. So yeah. So having that trivia power, I think that would work. That's kind of interesting. Also, just because it's that thing of like, tell me something I don't know, sort of guy. Like that's his like one or their one or her one. Like catchphrases is that thing of like, oh my god, he's like they're able to like just like punch through a wall. They walk up to them and go, tell me something I don't know, and it's like. Cows actually are made out of like 70% water instead of like 80% water, and then just it's like I already knew that. Tell me something I don't know, and it just eventually.
Did you know electric eels aren't actually eels?
It would just be that moment
They're
of you tell them something,
fish.
and you tell them something, and they suddenly power up like a Super Saiyan for a second, and it's like thanks, and then they walk away and just flick. At that point, they just flick a brick, and it just shatters into nothing because they're just getting more and more powerful over time.
It would literally be you'd be unstoppable because if you do tell someone you do, I just think that'd be the perfect power for you because you would just be like you could just actually anybody at any point. But if they do tell you something that they don't know, it'll make you more powerful anyway. There's no way you could lose. The only way that you could lose, I think, is if you lose your memory. Like if you had a telepath, just remove all of your memories and then just like shrink like a balloon.
It would be crazy if it was that thing of like, where are his powers? Well, here's the thing: I had to erase his mind, and now he doesn't have any powers. Oh, okay, well at least he's not that powerful. Yeah, here's the thing: I erased all of his memories, so he doesn't even remember growing up and learning anything. So he basically is just an empty shell. It's like,
well, you shouldn't have actually did that telepath.
Yeah, don't actually the mind eraser. No, I like
Shouldn't
that.
have actually me.
I'm gonna go next because I know that Sam, you probably need a little bit more time because you sometimes.
I've got one.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
As it often is the case, I've gone for one that is not immediately bad. It's like much like my bad. No, not you know me. My ideas tend to be not bad, but selfish, I guess.
Go on.
No, I don't know about that, but anyway, go on.
Like my band of moral purity or moral certainty. It was the more good deeds you do, the luckier you get.
Oh, so sort of like
karmic
good
almost.
deed. Yeah, like karma
Like literally
empowerment or something.
karma. So
Yeah,
like
that's
the
cool.
more good stuff, you do, you can like externally spend it for
It's
good stuff
like it's
happening to you.
it's how My Name Is Earl thinks karma works.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I love My Name Is Earl. I want that. I want that to be real.
yeah.
I do
Which,
covered
actually
it
like that.
work
I have to admit, I do actually like that concept. Like, hey, here's a, especially because if you turned it into either an anime or B into an actual live action show, it would work either way because it could be that thing of like this guy is about to go into battle, nobody else knows it, and there's just this homeless guy outside and go spare change, and he opens his wallet, gives him all of the money in his wallet, and just pops it in there. It's like, oh, thank you, sir, bless you, bless it, and he walks up, and then just walks into this building where there's like a bunch of like drug smugglers. Like, have you got my money? No, I just gave it away to a homeless person. Kill this fool. And the guy shoots him. The bullet ricochets and just kills everyone. It's like, yeah, here's the thing. I gave it to a homeless person. Therefore, I now am the luckiest son of a bitch in this entire room.
I give it to an
my
underfed
deathbed someday.
underage orphan who's lost a leg and is underfed. I am. I've given them enough to buy a house and their education.
Actually, there was a character that Joe created. Well, it was sort of like we don't know if we'll go back to it. I don't know if it's really a spoiler for future campaigns, but there was one character, one villain, that you came up with that had the opposite of those powers, which was spite empowerment. Where the more evil
Yes.
they did, the more powerful they became, and they became like probably one of the most hated villains even amongst villains because they would just do evil for the sake of it and get more power because of that.
So
Which is I thought that was such a cool concept.
It's actually something that we did a while back with the emotional stockpile empowerment, where it's like, oh, the user has anger and they have wrath, and then they have spite, and the way that it worked was just the concept of like, okay, so the more bad things they do, the more things that they do out of anger, or the more things that they do just to spite other people. Like, even like that thing of like, oh, this guy's holding on to my arm, and he's about to fall. I could just easily just pull him up and then beat him into submission until he lets go and then push him off again. No, cuts off his own hand, but then just gets enough power so that he doesn't need his hand anymore because he's just... That amount of spite is so ridiculous.
Oh.
Like, I'd rather lose this arm than let you live even another second longer, sort of thing.
What would be really good for that character as well as like that old saying, cut off your nose to spite your face. Like he's just walking around like Voldemort because there was a situation where he cut off his nose just out of pure spite, just purely to get out of a situation.
I like the
and
idea that it
screw
was
over
something as
someone
simple
else.
as... I like the idea of something as simple as like, oh, I've made this smell, so he just cuts off his own nose. There's that thing of like, that's not how it works, but then like just that spite just gives him just a teensy bit enough power to resist whatever the smell is or resist whatever the gas is.
Or at the very least, the person who made that smell, possibly that mind control smell, they were like, "Geez," they're like just sort of cowed. It's like, okay, fine, I'll put it
mind.
away.
Oh,
God.
jeez, my
Oh.
guy. Never mind. I'm sorry. Wait, why are you coming towards me? I said it's over. No, don't feed me it.
Again, I want this in a Netflix show. Make it. Okay.
If
I want to binge this.
If I could make a Netflix show on the Anime Tales, it would just be about like each episode would be like 45 minutes long or an hour long, and they'd all be about separate villains or separate heroes and a multitude of different ways that powers work, similar to in how anime works, where it's like, oh well, I've got a special different tricksy way that my power works, unlike any others. So it's like, aha, well, that you fell right into the trap of my power, or even just something as simple as like, well, here's the downside, and then they use the downside to their advantage. As you said, like, oh, they have to be very spiteful, so it's like kick something when it's down, or even just be as horrible as like cutting themselves just to get to someone, or removing their own nose just to spite their face, and it's like, why would you do this? And then that shock factor is like the very thing that lowers their guard just enough for them to actually get the upper hand or something. Obviously, it doesn't always need to be body horror. It could be something as simple as just a guy with special abilities to turn into slime, and his adventures as a slime guy. Although most of the special effects budget would be blown on just him being slime.
Or, the best part for Spy would just be spitting in someone's soup. and then serving it to them.
That's another
Just
one. Yeah,
watch
that's
it.
another one.
It's
Uh,
delicious. I made it. You could say part of me. I made it with part of myself.
as
My best
for
part into it.
as for stockpiling, I honestly, what I would want for stockpiling, really honestly, is it's kind of a weird one, really honestly, because like there's a ton of different ways that you could really consider stockpile powers. Something as simple as kinetic empowerment, like for instance, like falling flat on your face, and instead of breaking your nose, you absorb all of the concussive force, and then later on you can like blast it out and like hurt someone as just as badly as the same amount of force as you falling over, or
Kevin Bacon and X-Men.
like Kevin Bacon in X-Men, yeah, stuff like that, where like people have those kind of abilities where they're passive. Some people have the ability where they have to absorb it actively, knowing that they are absorbing this power, like Kevin Bacon. It's so weird how often that one comes up. But
7 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
I'd have to say, as for one for me, I really am overly like this guy who loves powers so much that I go from fad to fad. I mean, as of recent, I've been watching and reading way too much of the Baki anime and manga. So everything at the moment is just about like super strength, stupid capabilities of martial arts dexterity, and overly done muscle mass, which in all honesty, I as much as I love that series, I'm kind of over the whole everyone's got a 6-pack, 8-pack, 10-pack, back 10-pack for some reason. Like I'm kind
I don't know. It's told me to watch that. Is it any good?
you know what? I would say give it a watch, because at least then if you watch all the way through it, I have someone to talk to about it. I would say it's
So
good
the
though.
hidden agenda.
Because unlike a lot of other animes where they like call out the names of their special attacks, it is just all about the actual combats. It's about the fighting. It's about martial arts and the politics of martial arts in some ways.
I like that because that is one of my pet peeves, like announcing attacks before you do them.
Firebuster!
Sit, fire extinguisher. Oh no! Who could have seen that coming? Just yelled that at me. Like I came prepared. Like
Pepper flame, fireball. It's like, yeah, we kind of get now what you're doing. Like, it's not a surprise.
And sometimes it makes a sense, like if they're doing spells.
yeah, but it never is. That it's just
but
attacks and martial arts.
okay,
But...
fine, but sometimes it is still cringy because as much as I said I do love Naruto, sometimes when I rewatch some of the episodes where they scream out fire style, fireball jutsu, I'm like, a little bit of wince. I have just a.
Maybe it's like Hypano. They haven't actually learned how to say it quietly yet.
I know, you have to use your inside voice.
I want to point out, like, some of them do it without actually saying it, but the voice actors still say it because it's in their head, so that we know what ability they're using. Yeah, it's in their head so that the audience knows what they're doing.
It totally is variable. Like, there's not. I mean, this is the thing. It's just like, it's just like it's so we know what they're saying. Especially, hey, we know it's actually inconsistent, but you, the audience, you monkey brained audience, you have to know what spell we're doing. So that's why there's so much inconsistency in the Harry Potter movies, I think.
As for what I'd want, because I keep removing myself from the topic, and I keep postponing this almost like as if I don't have anything. I do have something, but I don't know if it's necessarily all that good. You already kind of took my one, Alex, which is like knowledge based.
Oh no, sorry.
And then Sam, you kind of took my other one that.
I mean, did I though?
Kinda. I mean, because already stress, solar power, and knowledge and stuff like that. Like the trivia one was like the newest comer to it. Like I was thinking, so many different possibilities, of different abilities. I was like, oh man, how could this work? Obviously, you've also got one of like Samson. Stockpile of how long his hair is equals the amount of super strength he has.
Oh yeah, that's technically
I'd like that because I like to grow out my hair and grow out my beard. I don't ever like to have massive shoulder length hair, but I do like to have a big old Viking beard, and I just think that's really cool. Like, man, his beard is so long and so big, and it's just like massively powerful. But if I was to come up with a new one, I'd say I'd say instead of that, I'd say possibly similar to the ability that you said, Alex. I'd say creativity instead of knowledge, like instead of trivia, inspiration. Um, but the only
Okay.
problem is at that point it's not really a stockpile because it's not something that you can take from the outside. So immediately it becomes the same problem of life force or any
I
other
mean,
powers that come from oneself.
what instead of plagiarist? What instead of creativity? Plagiarism. More stuff you plagiarize,
See
or power you get.
that's pretty cool. Like the more things that you take for yourself, or let let's just say it this way: someone says you say, okay, you have to come up with this really cool idea for a gun, and then they go, okay, yeah, and then you can make it appear, but it only works for you. And it's like, oh, you can actually amass it in a book of all these stolen ideas, powers, abilities, and all this stuff. And it's literally you've taken them and copied them. So it's a form of like copying, but it's a stockpile of different copied abilities, items, stuff like that. That could be
Oh,
interesting.
yeah, and if you
Oh,
tear up like the
just-
pages and stuff, it's like literally if you burn those books, it's like, no!
No, my stolen powers.
my no, not Luke Blywater, the greatest swordsman in the galaxy.
I'm trying to think. Like, there's got to be. There's
It's
got to
Oh,
be
I've
laser
got
another.
I've got
swordsman
one
in the
actually.
galaxy.
I've got a variant to your power where you'd actually do that by using creativity in a specific way for a stockpile. What if you're like a superpowered chef, right? And like the point is you create these edible works of art pretty much and you use your creativity that way, but it has to be through your own creative means and it has to be like a different dish at every point. If you have too much of the same or get bored, you won't get empowered by it. And if you have like a normal like peanut butter and jam sandwich, then it's like, all right, I guess. But if you create this wonderful, elaborate sort of profiterole tower with like all kinds of like, gold and stuff in that, you eat that, and then you gain your powers that way. That could be your
That
the
might
stuff.
also potentially at that point be metabolism powers. I was actually going to go back to something which actually crosses over from the previous episode to this episode, which is, I guess you could also say, like, the gluttony power from that time I was reincarnated as a slime, where you could absorb other people's magical abilities, powers, or even just literally absorb and
Mhm.
swallow up creatures and beings, and either spit them out as like a combined multiple ability creature or power or ability, or literally store it up in yourself and use them later on. Literally a stockpile of stolen creatures and stolen abilities. By
Only
technicality,
uses
you're absorbing, but you're actually stockpiling whatever you've absorbed.
doesn't he use magic to copy them? Like
Uh,
when he absorbed the sword of the wee dwarf, then he just made loads and loads and loads of them
yes,
because
although
it's
that's
magical.
a secondary ability that he does actually have. He has this ability called Predator, and he has the eventually the ability of like copy, where he actually can just like make no, it's duplicate or something, or replicate, where he can actually just keep making more of something.
Yeah,
So
like when
obviously,
he like absorbs that girl and becomes a guy, gets a
yes,
humanoid form.
but again,
Just say,
that's another part of it. But he actually does steal an ability called gluttony. He actually replicates an ability called gluttony. Ultimately, I guess you could also state he actually does he has amassed an entire like array of powers. Like he has an actual stockpile of powers that he has. So literally power stockpiling. I mean, in all honesty, as someone as interesting and as everything, my favorite character that anyone has ever made in the Anime Tales playtest has actually been Bill, because he was so close to creating, using Catalyst, new powers altogether. And to me, that is more interesting than anything else, because I'm not really one that, like, I wouldn't say I'm a guy who just, like, oh, I want every power ever. But I just like the idea of being able to like be the one person who everyone comes to and it's like, I want this, and they just go, cool, I can either give you that or I can manufacture it, but I need these and these items and these abilities and this DNA from this power user and stuff like that. I think that is cool. So the idea of being able to stockpile powers and making them into a factory of different abilities, I think that's kind of cool. Power stockpiling power, or the power to stockpile powers, all for one's ability. That's pretty cool.
could you? I know this is a bit off topic. But to stock, could you say Alex Mercer then, considering he stockpiles powers?
Yes. Because although he is copying them, because this is actually something I was going to say, copying by technicality, if they're permanently copied, or temporarily, they're still a stockpile, because you've amassed a bundle of different copies of powers.
And a memory, so yes, I'm okay now. We've agreed on one thing.
Yeah.
Alex Mercer is a stockpiler,
Yeah.
and that's good.
Yeah, he's a ton of different things, because absorption, stockpiling, copying, they all usually come together. And you know, I'd say the last thing that I was going to say is how this works in Animite Tales. We actually have copying, we actually have, as we said, amalgamation and absorption, but we actually do have 4 different stockpiling powers in the original 64 abilities. That will eventually be released throughout the modules. All of them currently are apprised of the ability to absorb elements and physical matter and life force to store it into a stockpile. There's then photonics, where anything that generates light, you can actually have it that your body absorbs the nutrients from the photons so that you can actually gain power from that. You then have kinetic stockpile absorption, where you can actually absorb power from any kinetic energy, blunt force trauma, impact, stuff like that. And then finally,
Kevin Bacon power.
Yes, although you can't absorb lasers.
I mean, in real life, Kevin Bacon can.
You think we were talking about his character? We're talking about Kevin Bacon.
And then
Unstoppable.
the last one is rage empowerment, or well, we've now changed it to emotional empowerment, where it's basically just like the Hulk, but we've changed it so it's any emotion rather. Well, you have to choose one emotion, but it's like any emotion that you specifically wish to choose.
I like that. It opens it up a lot more.
Yeah. So you can actually have it that is based on sadness and happiness, and also your transformation doesn't necessarily mean that you suddenly turn into this monster of like, oh, I'm so angry thanks to this happiness, or oh, I'm so uncontrollably this. It's just like the sheer rush of the emotion can, if you fail a willpower save, to just suddenly like outburst. But it doesn't mean that you're uncontrollable entirely, unless of course if you decide to do that. But that's more of a roleplay aspect in the game. But yeah, so yeah, those are the stockpile abilities that we have so far. Technically, again, you have body count under amalgam, you have copying, as we've said before, countless times beforehand.
Can you technically count? What was it? Electrokinesis. That's got a stockpile ability in it.
You
as well.
about to talk about discharge?
A little bit, yeah.
Yes, that I was literally going to say that one, and then you stole me. Stole it.
Oh, sorry.
No. No, I'm glad that you're actually the one who brought it up instead of me.
Thank you. I listen.
Thank you. Yes, where you can stockpile a certain amount of points, and that can be a modifier to your damage. Up to an extra 12 points of damage can be added to it if you store it all the way up. But it does have a limit and it does have a cap, but still, just that extra 12 points of damage can be the difference from you doing anywhere from 1 point of damage all the way up to 13 points of damage minimum, and all the way up to 20, and that's only at level 3. But anyway, last things last. Are there any other last things that you guys want to mention before we sign off on this episode? We've gone a bit longer than we usually do, although to be fair, I think it's now kind of almost a tradition for us to go over an hour.
We just got a lot to say, we got a lot to get out of our system.
I like that.
In fact, we could say we stockpiled all of this up and just outburst it.
I didn't realise I did. I honestly didn't think I was going to be talking this much about it, and I thought that for once you guys would be taking the headwind, but I was like, oh damn, no, I'm going to be talking a lot about this. So I apologise to our listeners if they think that they're going to be hearing Sam or Alex that much.
That's what they came here for, so that's fair enough. Don't worry. I am part of this podcast too, and you just skip Joe's bits. It's fine.
If you skip my bits, you got about 15 minutes of content, but
that's the
it's
best
solid
one.
Alex and it's solid Sam content.
To be honest, out of all us, Alex is the most internet famous.
That is true.
I keep saying this. I don't think so. I've not many people.
Sam, it is just a tradition for me to be on a podcast with people who are always more famous than me. Des,
That's me.
Des is more famous than me. When she asked me to come on her podcast, and then we were overshadowed by Ben, aka Puff and Forest, then Aiden from Aiden's channel, Aiden, Red Dice Diaries, and even back in the day, Rorik from Item Pouch, Cool Boy Shane. I'm name dropping, but literally every single person.
I don't know who you're talking about except for Puff and Forest.
Every single person who I've had on the channel, and every single person that I've ever done a podcast with on the 12D20 back when they were doing videos, every single person that I've ever podcasted with is more famous than I am. I might even say that, Sam, you are more famous than I am.
I mean, everyone in Tesco's does know my name.
That is good. I mean,
That is true. Yeah.
Even the customers
I'm
know
lucky
me.
if everyone in my own house knows my name, and there's only just one other person.
Oh man,
That's
you want to talk about it, Joe? Do you need a
deep.
moment?
I'm kidding.
Oh, yeah.
Emotional damage stockpiling. Can I have that one?
I wish, honestly, I wish I could have Twitter follower empowerment. Then I would at least have, that
What?
much in my stockpile,
Wait,
and that would actually mean something. Whereas in the real world, it means nothing.
What if there's a
We just-
swear jar of stockpile empowerment with where the more people who swear or blaspheme in front of you, you're more powerful, but it doesn't work
Oh.
when you do it. So it's
My
like,
house would be unbeatable.
I just-
Absolutely.
honestly, I just walk around like IKEA and just slightly move the furniture every now and again so that people stub their toe. That might be cheating in the terms of absorbing power, but come on.
Alex, do you just want the power from the South Park game?
Oh god, yeah, you can actually get that. I don't really follow.
No, it is his
South
power,
Park,
remember?
yeah, but yeah,
He has
they
the
do
power to
like a
gain
whole
Twitter
episode.
followers.
Oh yes, he does. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's the power to get
And,
to powers.
Yeah, make
what
that
the game's
real.
called.
I think it's
Remember
like
the
no,
first
it's
Fractured
the Stick of Truth.
butthole.
Oh no, that's
the
the
first
second
game.
one. No,
Oh
it's
no,
the
the
Stick
stick
of
of
Truth.
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 Yeah,
Stick of
that's
Truth.
it.
Dead.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, well, I know the Stick of Truth. I don't know about the. I haven't watched South Park in a long time, but yeah,
Have
that
I?
is a cool power.
Those are
anyway.
good.
I want to watch the pandemic special only just because it's the amount of work that's gone into it at this point. It's less about South Park. It's really edgy. It's more, to me, it's more. They've put a lot of effort into it. And I saw like the trailers going around it, and good for them to do that. I think that's.
Yeah,
I
I
think
will
that's
say,
really
like, even from South Park fans, they were sort of like, about it. But then again, it could be the good kind of divisive, where it's like actually asking questions and like, doing general things, or it could be bad. So that's your choice, Joe. It could either be really good or really bad.
I guess I'll find out. So
Yeah, you'll find out.
So I was gonna bring up two possible ideas for the next episode, and then we'll see in the comments and also see in between us talking about it, which is either double-edged powers, basically just anything and everything, items, weapons, even actual powers, anything that has special abilities that then have a downside or a weakness that, if is used, is made very apparent. You are paying a price because that you have taken this power, or you have used this weapon, or anything, or use this technique. And I mean, we could actually have this be a massive chapter where we actually talk about different ones. Like, first one is powers, second one is items, the last one is techniques.
Yeah, I think splitting it up would be a good idea because I have a lot to say about item. I mean, I know a lot about cursed items. I love them, but it's like that could be like that. I think that's like a whole other conversation for like cursed powers or like cursed anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would, if we are going to do that, I think split it up into three. And plus, there are three people on this podcast, so it's more poetic.
That is true. That is true. It would just be so great if I then messed that up, and just on the third and final episode, we actually just get a complete stranger to the audience, where we just get another guest. And it's like, yeah, so we're now going to talk about cursed techniques. And it's like, where is everyone else? It's just me and this other rando. I don't know who I'd get, but Man, that would be
That would be great as well if, like, it comes in and like Sam goes, well, and then he just cuts out of the internet and it's like, oh, just the two of us.
The one time I decide I think I'm sick, I'm too tired, can't be bothered, I have to go to work the next day early.
You know what, Sam? If we do actually have like at some point, if we do actually have a another person joining, and you say I can't do it, I'm going to be like, can you come in for like the first 5 seconds of the recording? Just because then we go like, hey, and it's me, Joe, and it's Alex, and then here's Sam, hi, gut, and then just cut out, and then we just then bring on the next person, and it just be like, anyway, and here's our guest of honor, or even just here's our guest of honor, anyway, and then there's also Sam, and Sam just goes, oh no, screw this, I'm not being on with them, and then just leaves.
I mean, we should keep this not for the audience, because then they might not. Then they won't be surprised. When
you've announced the attack.
Everything in this entire podcast is messy.
Surprise.
I feel like, let's be honest, they all know, and if any point, we're building a suspense. You might say a stockpile of suspense.
I mean, no, you won't.
Anyway, thank you very much for watching and listening and dealing up with us all over this time. Yes, we'll either be doing Double Edge Powers as a 3-part series, or we could very well be doing a different power altogether for the power.
What was the second one you wanted to bring up? You always said one.
The second one was unnatural natural abilities in fiction. Like, for instance, like the Force, or the or like Haki and Soul Wavelength in other words, like how it's almost magic, but they say, oh, almost anyone has the ability to access this somehow.
Kind of like willpower, I guess.
Yes,
in that sense, yeah.
But also just another thing, which is just like the concept of like natural physical abilities of martial arts in certain shows, where it's like,
yes,
this martial arts technique, and then they're just able to, like, I don't know, defy gravity or flash step or something. It's like, in the universe, they're not even considered to be like supernatural beings, because one of the ones that I was going to bring up is Ki from Dragon Ball Z, Chakra from Naruto, even though that there actually are beings without it. Actually, I wouldn't count Chakra from Naruto, but I would definitely count Ki from Dragon Ball Z, because it confirms that Ki is able to be manipulated by anything. It's just that nothing. It's just that you'd have to have training in it.
And Joe, we're definitely doing this, because then I get to mention the Shadow next week.
Oh, heck yeah.
I mean,
heck yeah.
I don't know if there's an
actual... We're doing that.
Unnatural.
We're doing that.
Sam...
No, because everyone can learn how to do it.
Wait, really? Like, everyone in his universe can learn how to do it?
I mean, it's essentially, it's like, apparently it's a Buddhist thing.
Oh, well, in that case, yeah, never mind.
In the movie.
I don't want to...
in the movie.
No, we won't spoil anything. All right, we won't spoil anything.
Yeah.
This
only one thing though. Watch the 1994 Shadow with Alec Baldwin. Watch it, Connor. Already.
This goes into like the Sunday game as well, because your character is somewhat based on the Shadow.
It is, and I was actually about to bring that up, but before we finish that off, I'm just going to say, as part of the outro, if you guys want to listen to us talking about double-edged abilities in fiction and in games, then have a look at that one. If you want us to do unnatural, quote-unquote, natural abilities in fictional universes, then let us know in the comments below. Thank you again for listening, and as of this Sunday, in other words, in a couple of days' time from when this is going to be placed on the YouTube, yes, that's right, it will be placed on the very Friday that we record it, you will be able to watch the stream that we do on Twitch. That's Joey the Mystic on Twitch, and we will be streaming our second ever Dev Plays play, as it will be the first episode of a new campaign. This will be our second campaign as we playtest through Animate Tales whilst I'm still writing up all of the things for the playtesting, and at some point we will have that released at some point. But until then, we still need playtesting. So we're getting Juice as a new addition, as well as you guys know Ben. You two introduced Ben to me, so that's another one. Yes. And also we'll have some other people returning, so you two and Graham and Bill. We don't have Kane anymore, but we do have two new others. So they'll be doing a villain campaign, and it'll actually be set in the universe that we've sort of been building up for the main modules. There won't be any spoilers to any of the modules, because this will be set in a separate sort of time period. It will be 2 years after when the Super Society is supposed to be taking place. So I can do about with the canon as I really want. So again, zero spoilers, because again, the module is entirely based on players' perspectives and choices. So to be honest, it's not really going to turn or change anything. So you'll actually get to see the Super Society either being crumbled or being worked around by the villains. So check that out as the Dev Plays Villain campaign on Sunday, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. BST. That's British Standard Time.
Summertime.
Yeah, it's British summertime.
Actually, Joe.
No, let me have this.
Oh.
Thank you very much for everyone for listening. Take care and have a good night.
Bye.
See you in the future.
Sorry guys, I stopped the recording. I'm kidding. Ciao ciao for now.